But she wasn't actually ignoring everyone. Her attention just wasn't on me. I could see the love blooming. I saw her hand touch his shoulder. I saw the looks that they exchanged in a way they thought must be innocent. But with as much alcohol as the four of us had consumed on the water that day, no thought was innocent. I could see the lust bubbling between Craig and Kate. I could even feel the hatred filling my own mind. I could see the pitying glances from Becca at the other end of the boat. Eventually I stopped speaking. My mind wandered to how this always seemed to happen to me. Every time I would get close to a woman, my hesitation got in the way. They always seemed to move on, simply because I liked to develop a friendship before becoming romantic. But as I was trying to spark a romance, the object of my affection was harboring a carnal fire for my best friend. I sat drunk, brewing in my anger. I felt Becca's hand touch my back softly. She had always tried to comfort me, even through 3 years of breakups and tragedies. Too embarrassed to accept her sympathy this time, I shrugged her off, getting up from my seat without looking at her and standing at the other end of the boat. Taylor felt defeated as the evening went on. Nothing he seemed to do could make this beautiful woman even pay attention to him, let alone have any feelings for him. He tried to talk to her as often as he could. Still, she ignored him. He tried to sit next to her at dinner. She would shift her chair. He tried to tell her a joke. She would not laugh. He tried to put his arm around her waist. She would excuse herself from the room. Taylor only felt worse when Becca began making the same gestures to him. When he was rejected, Becca would sit next to him, tell him a joke, and hug him. She felt sorry for him, and the pity was embarrassing Taylor in a way Becca couldn't imagine. He needed to get away, so he took a small boat from the boathouse to go fishing alone. As he paddled out into the calm black water, guided only by the light of the moon, Taylor began to reminisce about tales he had heard about a giant fish that resided in a lagoon near his family lake home. Fishermen said that the great fish would grant anyone one wish. In fact, he remembered that many of the men were able to gain the love of their wives by wishing to the Perch King. He turned the boat towards the lagoon and paddled. On the water, I thought more and more on the situation at the house. I felt betrayed. I had kept Craig as a friend since my first semester of freshman year, and now, nearly 4 years later, I felt as though I had wasted 4 years dedicating my efforts to a friend who was only going to betray me. I paddled in the boat, more existential questions flying through my head. Where had my life come? Why could I not find anyone to share my emotions with? Why couldn't this woman, who was the object of physical perfection, want me back? Would anyone ever want me? A foghorn and a distant light interrupted my thoughts. I turned around slowly and saw a large yacht approaching. I stopped paddling as the foghorn got louder and louder, and the light got brighter and brighter. My arms were frozen. I was motionless in the face of looming danger, and I had no will to change my course. The yacht veered right, narrowly missing the dinghy, but threw it into the water in its violent wake. I fell into the water, plunging into the depths. After being thrown into the water by some unknown force after paddling to the lagoon, Taylor found himself submerged in the lake, thrashing and searching for the surface. Taylor emerged from the water, breathing heavily. He looked around and saw that he had been thrown about 20 feet from the boat. In between himself and the dinghy, however, Taylor saw a glimmering light. He could tell that the light was the moonlight bouncing off some unknown reflective surface. He wasn't looking at water, but a shimmering, scaly shape coming toward him quickly. Suddenly, the shape disappeared in the depths. Taylor paused, confused and frightened, until he heard a splash behind him. He spun around in a panic. The head of an enormous fish was all he could see across the dark lake. The creature's face was wide and short, more like a catfish than the fish which folklore suggested. His enormous mouth was contorted in a frown, with long whiskers falling from the corners of his mouth. His eyes were black as coal, but, upon matching eyes with Taylor, his eyes rolled back, revealing a second set of eyes that were piercing green. Fish and man stared at each other, frozen for what seemed to Taylor to be almost an eternity, until the fish opened its great mouth and began to speak. "So you have found me." The slow drawl of the fish seemed to echo across the lake, blocking out all other sounds. "Do you know what you shall request?" Taylor was caught off guard. His surprise had left him unable to speak, and the fish continued to stare at him. Taylor then remembered the tales that told of the fish offering one wish of love to whoever found him. Then, suddenly able to speak again, Taylor blurted, "I asked to be in love, right?" Taylor's emotions overwhelmed him, and he gasped the last word of the sentence. "Thus as you have found me, you will find love. But love must find you as well." The fish disappeared in a splash of water, and Taylor was left alone. He yelled to no one in particular in confusion. What did the fish mean? How would he find love? Would this make Kate love him? What would change? Feeling more alone, I paddled toward shore. Despondent, betrayed, and now soaking wet, I approached the shore feeling a hole through which my insides were falling. I was so apprehensive to face my friends, not simply due to their betrayal, but because seeing their faces would only remind me of my failures, in friendships, in relationships, everything. Where would I go from here? Taylor finally docked and headed to the back door of the lake house. He entered and began taking off his wet clothes. Upon entering the house, he immediately threw his wet shirt into the dryer and turned his head to see Becca, who, upon seeing him notice her, quickly walked away. Taylor kept his gaze on her for a few seconds as she walked away and was confused as to why her stare did not send daggers into the pit of his stomach, as her stares of pity did before.